But the most important company for the Obama energy plan is a company that no longer exists today, and it's Enron. Having worked at Enron for 16 years and having been Ken Lay's speechwriter for the last 7 years, and having been asked while I was at the company to begin the process of writing a history of the company, I wanted to come out with a definitive version of events that showed that the mainstream got it almost exactly wrong. That Enron was not the result of capitalism proper or free market capitalism. It was a result of the mixed economy, or in particular political capitalism, where a business uses government intervention, lobbies for government intervention, shapes the regulations for its own benefit, whether it's a regulation, a subsidy, or a particular tax provision. And Enron, more than any other company in the history of the United States, except for perhaps some defense contractors and perhaps ADM, which has lived off ethanol subsidies from the beginning, was enabled by special government favor. Ken Lay was a political entrepreneur, a rent seeker. He was not a free market capitalist in any sense of the word. The mainstream should have blamed the mixed economy rather than capitalism proper, and they didn't want to delve that much. One example: George W. Bush, who was governor of Texas during Enron's heyday and then became president of the United States, they tried to blame Enron on him and the Republican Party. Well, George W. Bush did one thing that really helped Enron as governor of Texas, and that is sign an electric deregulation bill, so-called deregulation bill, that had a provision that required utilities, electric utilities in the state of Texas, to buy a certain percent of their electricity from renewable energy, which meant wind power. Enron had a subsidiary, Enron Wind Corporation, and that provision aided Enron more than anything else that George W. Bush did. And George W. Bush's decision at this point really launched Texas as a leading wind energy state in the whole country. And it really sets a precedent for what could be the Obama energy plan of mandating renewables across the whole country. Yeah, unfortunately, in our mixed economy, we have other Ken Lay types. One would be T. Boone Pickens, who has a proposed $10 billion wind power project that he needs a lot of eminent domain and a lot of government subsidy to bring into the market. Aubrey McClendon of Chesapeake Energy is also working on the Pickens plan with Boone Pickens, where they want to use a lot of government intervention to subsidize the conversion of automobiles and trucks to compressed natural gas. That would be very expensive, and the free market would have none of it. On the electric utility side, Jim Rogers, the head of Duke, one of the very largest utilities in the country, is a Ken Lay protege. He was my big boss, my boss's boss, and he learned at the feet of Ken Lay, and when he left Enron to go into the public utility sector, he became CEO of a utility with a lot of coal production. He decided to team up with the environmentalists and endorse cap and trade, a carbon rationing program. Really the first utility executive to do so. And his thinking was, if you're the first to the party, if you get your seat at the table, that you can shape these regulations where it will help you, of course, at the expense of your competitors and consumers. And he's followed this strategy since the late 1980s, and The latest is that Jim Rogers' plan for cap and trade was rejected by the environmentalists, and now Jim Rogers wants to put a tax on carbon dioxide, which is obviously very bad for consumers. Energy policy under an Obama administration will be very interventionist. The green jobs idea that we can build these massive wind turbines and solar panels and somehow this brings us to prosperity it's a great myth, but it's probably something we're going to see, and it's going to be a real challenge for the Democratic Party, which is supposedly the party of the middle class, the small guy, the small gal, to reconcile high-cost, unreliable energy with the common good. My book talks about Enron's early investments in solar power, wind power, all with government favor. And the Obama energy plan would be the Enron energy plan writ large for the whole country. Enron's strategy of sustainable energy centered around wind power, solar power, and major changes in energy efficiency. The Obama energy plans is centered around the exact same thing, that our energy future has to move away from fossil fuels toward renewables. And so if you look back and see what Enron was doing, the rationale, all that comes into play with the Obama energy plan. And that's something that's going to be popularized against Obama's energy strategy. As far as my background, I first became interested in libertarian ideas in high school when I read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I went to college, became very interested in free market economics, particularly Austrian school economics. And after college, I received an advanced degree in economics and was working for a bank in Houston, and they asked me to do an industry study. They got me very deep into oil and gas regulation. From that, I wrote a book for the Cato Institute called Oil, Gas, and Government, the U.S. Experience. And then after that was over, I decided to go into the business world and got an invitation to join Enron. And I got to know Ken Lay, the PhD chairman there. He had a PhD in economics. And I worked there for 16 years, and for the last 7 years, I was director of public policy analysis on the corporate level. And one of my main jobs was writing speeches for Ken Lay, so I got to know Lay very well. So when the company collapsed, I was in a very good position to write my own history of events. And it was about at that time that I became interested in Ayn Rand and objectivism again. When I saw the collapse of Enron, I realized this was right out of an Ayn Rand novel. And so when I was writing my writing Capitalism at Work, I have a whole chapter devoted to Rand's ideas, which to me explain the Ken Lay paradox about how a person who superficially at least had all this talent and all this energy and all this vision ended up in practice being a total failure. And I think the insights of objectivism, of philosophical fraud come into play here. Something else interesting about Ayn Rand, as I went through her books and studied her personal life, I realized that she was party to the Enron of the objectivist libertarian movement, and that is the breakup of the Nathaniel Branden Institute back in 1968. And I have an appendix in the book called The Ayn Rand Problem, where I draw analogies between that event, which ruptured the libertarian objectivist movement. Thousands of people were bewildered and stranded because of that. Analogizing that to Enron, and I think there's a number of parallels.